Track your every movement. Okay. Hello and welcome. My name is Dan Meyer. I am Editor-in-Chief of RCR Wireless News. Thanks for joining us today. Today I am joined by Ken Dilbeck, who's the VP of Collaboration R&D at TM Forum. Ken, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
I appreciate the offer, Dan.
Great. Well, let's maybe start off with, for those who don't know much about the TM Forum, maybe a quick intro on yourself and then also on the TM Forum.
Okay. First of all, I'm Ken Dilbeck. I'm as you mentioned, the VP of Collaboration R&D. I've been in the telecom industry for over 30 years now and have worked all aspects all the way from billing systems on through system support, worked in the data centers within a large networks operator here in the United States. I spent a brief time at a software integrator and then spent about 8 years working with a network equipment provider doing element management systems. So I've seen pretty much the entire OSS, BSS stack and I'm familiar with all the challenges from top to bottom there. And then I spent the last few years working with the TM Forum and working within the collaboration space. You know, I wanted to introduce the forum a bit in case the folks aren't familiar with that. TM Forum is a global nonprofit standards organization or industry consortium, actually. We're not a legal standards organization. We develop best practice and some degree standards and frameworks around management of systems involved in the communications industry, everything from the OSS, BSS traditional spaces across those boundaries, top to bottom across that stack. We have about, I think we're over 1,000 member companies at this point. We're 195 different countries with about 85,000 engineers involved or various people involved at different capacities within the group.
Sounds good. And obviously, with your history there in the space there, obviously you know where all the bodies are buried. So quite a bit of history there in the industry. So that's good.
No, a few of them.
Very good. Well, one thing we want to touch on a little bit here on this conversation today is kind of looking at the NFV space, which is obviously been getting a lot of traction, a lot of hype over the past 12 to 18 months. I know you guys have been working in that space for quite a while now, and it does seem like that NFV. Is perhaps new to a lot of people, but it does seem like there's been quite a bit of work done, perhaps behind the scenes on the standard and trying to get kind of the move towards the NFV in the telecom space. So hoping to get, I guess, some insight from you on kind of where we are in that process. I mean, obviously, the hype cycle of a lot of these things. Obviously, the chart's pretty familiar where it gets up really high initially and then kind of fades down pretty quickly. So maybe I guess get from your point of view, how is I guess the standards process, or how is NFV coming along in terms of getting it, I guess, ready for telecom, kind of the telecom space and the wireless space?
Well, that's it's an interesting question, and you have to step back and realize or think about the fact that virtualization has been involved in the IT infrastructure for years now. I mean, virtualization is not new, and then there are some very sophisticated cloud virtualization implementations out there. What is new is the desire to take those virtualization techniques and apply them into a network fabric. That's where a lot of the new momentum is taking place, and where you see a lot of the interest, especially with groups, like the formation of the ETSI NFV group, and just the wildfire take-up of that piece of work and how fast it's progressed has been pretty amazing. But it also tells me that the industry was ready for that. They were taking things. This wasn't people say, well, NFV didn't exist. The concepts existed.
Yeah.
And they've been able to leverage the concepts out of the the data center and the IT space, and now they're applying them here. So they've been able to move forward very rapidly. There's when you're applying known patterns and known techniques to problems, it's much quicker than if it's all a discovery process. So I'd say that the standardization process there has moved extremely fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's the culture behind that is going to be struggling to catch up for a while. Within the organizations, how do we absorb this much change? How do we take this much these new techniques and new approaches and apply it to an environment that's been pretty static for a long time, at least from the pattern of acquisition and the way people think about their problems and their domains. From a standards perspective, there is a lot of activity going on, and the scramble is to be able to do it quick enough. And then the problem domain is large if you look at it from the overall perspective of how do I chain all of these things together, and not just, if I focus on a specific technology, you can say, okay, well, I kind of have my hands around that, but it's that end-to-end challenge that's, I think, really lurking on the horizons for the SDOs.
Yeah, I mean, is that kind of where we are right now? Because it does seem like that it is, a bit of a wild west out there at this point. I mean, it seems like, like you said, the Etsy NFV came out. Etsy came out pretty heavily behind it, and a lot of companies got on board, like you said. And it seems like even any sort of standard that comes out, or any sort of partnership or program that comes out around NFV at this point, seems to be getting a lot of attention from vendors. It seems like the vendor community maybe doesn't know where to go exactly, so it's just kind of going everywhere at this point to try to make sure that they're involved in what's being placed out. Does it seem like that? Is that where we are, where it's just kind of still so new that people aren't quite sure how to deal with it, and they're just trying to find their footing?
Well, yeah, I think that's really an accurate representation. Is that and the other aspect to that is there are so many different aspects to virtualizing your infrastructure.
Sure.
So each one of these groups do have expert knowledge in specific domains. Whether it would be from security or optimizing the deployment stacks, things down into the OpenStack, OpenFlow areas, to more of the open platform areas that you see people focusing on. Those are all problems that require different domain experts. So you're seeing people cluster around their specific domain, topic area,
mm-hmm.
and say, now how do we apply virtualization? So you've got a whole bunch of people working in their domains on virtualization, and the real challenge is, once they look up, how do we glue all those techniques together? Because it's, if I'm over here and I've developed my solution for security, but I hadn't considered the way they're actually going to do operational deployment whenever they move equipment from, when I install a VNF on hardware, there's challenges there, and it's going to be that communication link between the different organizations, probably the biggest challenge. And not only that, within the experts, that may appear that you have HP participating in different areas, and I'm purely an example why I put in HP. Yeah. They have different divisions and different groups of experts within their own organization that are all representing, their positions. It doesn't mean there's necessarily a unified position across those guys. That's just the natural way it's always happened. Is the people with a certain technical expertise tend to cluster together.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, obviously, I know I get a lot of requests from companies, the same company, but you're right, different divisions within that company wanting to talk about NFV, and it does seem like when you talk to them that perhaps there is not quite that connection between their respective silos, basically, inside those companies on this topic, and it does seem like that's kind of where we're at. I mean, does that seem like kind of, like you said, that's kind of one of the bigger challenges we're facing at this point, is just, trying to make sure that while this work is progressing, that there still has to be some sort of, hopefully at the end of the game, a connection that can be made between these, so that when the actual deployments begin, that this stuff actually works, relatively smoothly.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at. Plus, I've mentioned I've been in this for a while and been in standardization for a while. This is not a new phenomenon. This is a pattern that's existed for years. What's really new right now is the speed at which they're all moving. The industry, is really feeling the pressure to get the virtualization capabilities out there to make, the new service facilities, particularly for the operators, are viewed as critical in order for them to grow new revenue. So, there is a lot of focus on this, not just from the technical side, but from the business enablement side. So there's a lot of upside, therefore there's a lot of pressure to make it move very, very quickly, and therefore everyone's trying to address their problem as quickly as they can. The challenge is going to be really when it comes to how do we glue this together. But hopefully, and I think this is the case, there is a recognition that all of these things are going to have to interact, and I see more awareness in the organizations and more discussions about the need for collaboration and the need to reach across these boundaries and say, hey, expertise in to help us address our, for example, security problem. You guys know how to do this. And one of the other things we're trying to do very aggressively is reach into the experience that the data centers and leverage that. They've conquered some of these problems. There's no reason for us to take on this in a greenfield environment. Let's go take the techniques that they use and apply them to our the new problem domain.
Yeah, I know I've been to a few of your events recently, and that does seem to be kind of the focus of the events, is the fact that there is already expertise in a lot of this that's going on, like you said, from legacy IT systems and data, and it's just a matter, it seems, from talking to people at your events, it's just a matter of transferring that information to the telecom space and to the broader telecom space, or the wireless space more specifically, to kind of make sure it's a smooth transition and kind of bring the people together to like you said, use that knowledge that's already there to make this an easier process.
Yeah, I don't want to indicate there aren't some new challenges because of the nature of a network versus the nature of a data center. However, there's a lot of similarities. There's probably more similarities than difference.
Yeah. Does it seem like that? I guess this perhaps this rush and this still kind of things are still trying to, I guess, work their way out. Is that impacting? Do you think the telecom industries and specifically carriers or operators, their adoption of NFV, or do you think that because telecom companies in general have always been very conservative. They like to control a lot of things. They don't really like to try something new if it impacts customer quality or any issue like that. Does, I guess, the uncertainty perhaps in NFV right now, is that impacting, do you think, any sort of adoption potential for the telecom space when it comes to moving along to these virtualized platforms?
What I'm seeing in that area is there are more in-lab efforts going on right now than you would have seen a year after the announcement of a new technology. I mean, the speed at which they've been able to introduce this into their labs and actually start to do stuff has been incredible. And I think what they're able to do there is within those organizations, they have experience because they've been playing with cloud for years. So they know about virtualized infrastructure. They know about x86 boxes. They know how to bring those in. The cost to start a trial is reduced dramatically. So now they can go out and start to do POC stuff. Now, I think where the real challenge is going to be, when are they going to be comfortable enough to roll this out into an active deployment and start making the substantial investment. And I think the interoperability and the service enablement issues that we talked about earlier are going to be where when that decision point is going to happen. Is they're going to say, we have to have this capability, and this capability before we're willing to put this into our infrastructure. And it's going to be those questions that the industry, from the operator's perspective, when are they comfortable making that rollout that's going to take it from the labs and into the field? And that's probably the bigger question. Going to be willing to stand up a true operational silo. And I would predict that the majority of the new implementations are going to be silo implementations initially, and then they'll drift into, how do we get to a hybrid environment, and how do I put this into my core network? It's getting it to the core is going to be the real challenge.
Yeah. That's a good point too, because it does seem like operators, or at least talking to some of them, there are people there, and also with the vendors, is that is kind of the key, really. I mean, for this is to spread it out along the operations as wide as possible, and then as deep as possible too. But like you said, the siloed approach does seem like that's going to be the initial working into it, because it does seem like operators are going to maybe dip their toe in the water a little bit here and there, maybe virtualized, some parts of the OS SBSS at some point, or virtualize some of the customer care or something like that, and then perhaps broaden their approach to the deployment of virtualization.
Yeah, and what you hit one of the things when you talked about the OSS BSS, and I think there's been some recent articles talking about some of the field trials. What they're recognizing is the technical deployment of the virtualized hardware into the field. That's the tip of the iceberg as far as the problems that they have to address. The OSS BSS stack is probably going to be one of the biggest inhibitors for their ability to actually put these products into their environments and be able to monetize them and manage them effectively. So there's a lot of management issues there. There's also a lot of issues around culture and organization that they realize that they have to take care of. And we're doing some work on what we call NFV readiness, which is actually looking at some of what are those softer issues about, how do I even buy this? What does a VNF package look like, and how do I know I got one? And then, and the whole change in mentality from a procurement organization that's been built around procuring specialized hardware and specialized management software to buying off the shelf and buying software components is a massive change. The IT groups have got things that we can learn from, but it's still going to be a dramatic shift for the operators' organizations.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, because it does seem like that, because it is such a big change for the operators internally, that it seems like it's going to be important that there is a support for this from the highest levels of the organization. I mean, whether it's C-level or wherever it's got to be, but it seems like that's got to be an important part of this, because they're really going to drive not just the initial move into this, but also the continued support of this move. Because again, you can start out doing it, and then after a year, people tend to kind of maybe find something new to go play with. But it seems like this really is going to need that top-down support from the highest levels to kind of get it going, and then keep it going once it gets moving.
Yeah, but I think that's part of the way the forum launched its NFV initiative. We call it the Zero Touch Orchestration, Operations, and Management, Zoom. So we didn't even put NFV in it. NFV is an enabling technology, and what we're seeing is a recognition across that, and I think in the boardrooms, they view this all as the ability to increase their ability to deliver service and to drive OpEx and CapEx out of their networks. And those are what they're seeing. They're seeing this from a business focus. So I don't think there's going to be any lack of attention from the boardroom on resolving these issues. In fact, it may be too much attention, right? and in some cases, pushing things very, very quickly and very rapidly. And I think that's why there's the pressure, and also the willingness to spend money from those firms to address the issues and get things out there quickly. If you look at some of the financial commitments for some of the foundations that have been stood up recently, people are really serious about this. This is not a casual investment.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because it does seem like, like you said, it is being the financial impact of this is big on carriers, and carriers, like you said, they're trying to make sure they're on top of things when it comes to rolling out new services, and they're having to compete against the OTT guys out there. So this is a real issue for them, and the timing of it could be I guess the critical aspect of this, because it does seem like carriers are asking for this capabilities yesterday, and again, it's just a matter of making sure that's working right before you start rolling this out, because the worst thing you can do with this is not have it correct, or not have it right when you start rolling it out. So, but I guess that brings in kind of the importance of the standards bodies of this too, because it does seem like that they really are under the gun or under some pressure to make sure that they do, I guess, try to meet some aggressive deadlines, but also do so without cutting corners. And that's going to be I could really turn this thing around.
Yeah, there's I mentioned culture a couple times. From a standards organization, you move things forward by developing consensus. You reach agreement around things. Consensus takes time. Even if we sort of think we agree when we start the conversation, in order to get it down to, we really have agreed, that takes time. And all of the organizations are suffering from the same thing, is that the expectations to deliver and the time frames to deliver and the traditional ways of developing consensus aren't meshed real well. So, we're looking at different ways to employ what more agile type techniques to standards development, trying to think outside the box. How do we get to consensus quicker? What level of consensus do we really have to have? Because this is now more software. This isn't I'm burning silicon or I'm doing this very tightly coupled stack. I'm doing much more of an API definition, and if I get it wrong, I can back it out and roll a new version very rapidly. All the way. If you watch DevOps and the impact to some of those things, and the way Google, organizations like Google, how often they introduce versions and changes and roll that in, it's how do we get to that mindset, and what role do standards play whenever I'm in that mindset? What are the ultimate critical elements for us to agree to so that we can interoperate, and then how can we say, okay, that one's good enough, let's go with it and grow it and adapt it as it moves forward. As I said, that's a major change culturally for all of the organizations and all the people involved with them. They that's just not the mindset from if you go to a traditional ITU meeting, and they have to get it right before it goes out the door, because the financial implications are so giant. If you go to some GitHub on software, if it's close enough, they go with it, and they change it on the move. So you got to of those cultures.
Yeah, that's a great point. Right, I guess that is kind of one of the benefits of going to the software virtualization platform is you're right. I mean, if something isn't quite 100% initially, you can easily update it pretty rapidly. That's going to make it hopefully it makes it easier for operators to be a little more comfortable with rolling this out, because again they can make changes pretty easily, a few keystrokes, and something's updated, and it's not such a big deal. So that'll hopefully.
Yeah. There'll be some there are tensions because of the types of applications that run in a telephone network. I don't want my E911 service to have that glitch that says, okay, it was down for 2 hours.
Yes.
No. Anyways, so that's where there's going to be an evolution, and both sides are going to mature about a bit, and a lot of the infrastructure in the telephones and network is a little more sensitive to outage than what's in data centers.
Yeah, that's a great point. You're right. There is a lot of regulatory issues and mandates and things that telecom operators have to have in place. And you're right. So I'm sure virtualization in some of those aspects of it will probably be a longer term, if at all, type of a move. Because you're right. Like you said, and those are things that they cannot risk at all. That's not a 5 nines. That's a 100% no questions asked about it. So.
Or you're going to be explaining it to your congressman.
Yeah, exactly. That's a bigger issue there. So that's something they can't risk that. So very interesting. Well, Ken, we definitely appreciate the insight onto this. I mean, obviously it's a topic that is worth following, because again, it is a bit of that hype cycle going on right now, and there are so many moving parts to this. And I know the standards bodies and TM Forum, for instance, are working very aggressively and trying to make sure that this continues to move along at a rapid clip, but still making sure you're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's on this too. So I know it's for you guys a pretty busy time right now.
Oh, absolutely. We're right at the wrap-up of one of our phases, so we're feeling the time crunch. We have deliverables that are going to wrap up by the 31st, and we've got about 6 or 7 of those, and we've got people, as always, when you're at the end of the session, that's when the smoke hits. Everybody gets real excited. So, yes, there's a lot of work, a lot of effort. We've got a lot of really dedicated people helping us get the documents ready to get out there and be available for the industry.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, Ken, hopefully, again, we can touch base on this topic again, because I'm sure, like he's talked about here, it's definitely an rapidly evolving market and industry. So hopefully we can touch base again on the topic, but we definitely appreciate the time today.
Okay, thank you very much, and hopefully you found it beneficial.
Very good. Thanks so much.
Okay, take care.